Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 14. Dressel was nothing more than a rumor, Vader deduced, for the benefit of running the Empire on errant missions across the galaxy in search of a rebel base that remained hidden, despite following up on as many rumors as sprang up. He had taken command of several in the past week alone, but this time it was done to distract him from his train of thought on Mustafar, with no effect whatsoever. My lord, long-range scans show nothing of interest. Our two cruisers are acting out as scout vessels, completing their runs of the vagrant moon settlements on the far end of the sector. But nothing of note has been reported thus far. The attaché adjutant addressed the Dark Lord. Vader looked in his direction, saying nothing. The methodical inhale and exhale echoed throughout the command deck, disturbed only by pings and whistles from the various tech suites and bays, sounding out their respective reports. The adjutant reversed step, not waiting for a reply, and quickly shuffled away. Staring out the viewport, Darth Vader could not shake the thought of his former Padawan, Skywalker's former Padawan. Her thought took him down several avenues of their creation, maddening his limited patience. He had learned to adjust his life to the suit, but hated it with a burning passion simultaneously because the suit would not adjust to him. The cycle he used to fuel his rage, the source of his power, became his mantra, although it helped little to decipher his decision-making process. To add to the already challenging puzzle of her actions and her mere presence was his master's complete silence on the matter. He needed to vent his anger and frustration. He needed to channel his brewing rage into action. He would find her himself. He would end any collusion that may or may not be actively transpiring. He would find her and face her. He would finish her and let his destiny dictate his actions in doing so. He was well beyond inquisitive at the moment. It was time for statements, not questions. Action, not pondering. My lord, the Emperor demands you communicate with him. The same adjutant rattled behind him, breaking Vader from his moment of decision. Without a word, he spun from the viewport and broke for the holotable at the aft end of the command center with long strides. Ensuring the door was closed before receiving, he faced the center of the table. What is thy bidding, my master? A question, Lord Vader. Why is it I find you in Dressel without consulting me prior? Palpatine spoke with deliberate emphasis. Vader wasted no time. I'm following your initial instruction to search out and destroy rebel perpetrators, my master. Ah, then a viable lead you think you possess? The Emperor paused briefly before continuing. It is of no consequence for now. Your task force will be needed at Scarif in short order. I trust you won't become too distracted to be of service there. Of what purpose is our presence to suggest at Scarif? Vader was being compliant and nothing more. Whatever purpose I deem necessary, Lord Vader, of which you will be apprised en route, Palpatine returned. Vader refrained from adding anything further, just stared with intent at the image of his master, wondering if his time to ascend the throne of the Sith was close at hand. Something more you wish to add? No, Vader said more quickly than intended, the hatred burning in the eyes behind the mask, wanting nothing more than to rip this man apart, piece by piece. Careful, Lord Vader, your emotions betray you. You had me convinced the conflict was abated. Was I misled in my judgment? No. Vader waited a little longer this time for emphasis. There is no conflict, only power. Good, good. Your anger makes you very powerful indeed, an ability you're going to need in the coming days, Palpatine cackled as that transmission ended. Vader stared into the space that remained for a few minutes. He hated that man, yet worshipped him, turning his anger and rage into a power he could effectively channel. That is until he saw the images of his former Padawan using her anger and rage to deal highly effective carnage, not unlike him. Turning back for the main command deck, he strode with authority through the opening doorway and boomed his voice through the room. Commander, recall the cruisers at once, and make ready the fleet for Scarif. He didn't wait for a reply and made for his quarters. This is it, Ahsoka. Hangar 35, Kawani said as they neared the hangar entrance. Ahsoka took a moment to survey the ship's surroundings and the contents of the hangar. Several service droids were making superficial repairs to the KDY-D5, as well as a fuel lead currently retracting to its source bay on the hangar wall. She took a minute to appreciate the Mantis, registered as Deep 7, as it was an uncommon vessel in its own right. We'll need to screen the ship before we even consider taking it. I am sure there is surveillance posted inside and around it, Ahsoka said, pointing out the obvious. I can handle that. I'll have R3 run the necessary scans, Kawani said as she pulled her comm to her mouth and issued the commands to her astromech. That worked pretty well last time, Ahsoka chided, turning to her with an eye raised. You may need some of your transponder magic too, though, she finished. Easier done than said, Kawani finished with a smile. They both clung to the wall outside the entrance, waiting on the astromech. Ahsoka, someone wants you for something, alive at that. I tracked the original bounty and dispatched the hunter. Well, he more or less dispatched himself, but I have a feeling it was just a means to flush you out. This someone knows enough of you, and me for that matter, to figure out how to do just that. All a consequence for my actions on Narshada, no doubt, she sighed heavily. With a pretty extensive list of things not to do, that may be at the top. It's hard to explain, but I don't even know at the moment what I was doing, to be honest, and having some time to think about it. Think about it, Ahsoka. Only a few individuals would have taken offense to the things you said, never mind your actions. The two you were specific about would have just simply established an execution order, not demanded your abduction. At least that's where my thinking takes me, Kawani said rather bluntly. There is that, and even that line of thought has multiple variables, Ahsoka said more to herself as she brought a thumb and forefinger to her chin. Why alive? And who are the two most important questions to answer first? She said to finish the thought, staring intently at the sandy ground. Having a moment to reflect, they let the latest events register and ran through the possible importance of each sequence in the ordeal. Ahsoka, who was that Iktochi? Kawani was curious. Ahsoka squinted in deep thought, coming out of the mental reverie, shaking her head. I have no idea. I've never seen him before, nor have I seen that particular use of the Force either. It was easy to spot once I could focus on my strengths, but my intuition tells me he greatly underestimated you. He underestimated us, Kawani. You underestimate yourself, Ahsoka laughed. Who he was, though, now that I think about it, is less relevant than who sent him and where he got this. She pulled out the saber hilt, which she was sure belonged to Master Windu, and stared at it intently as R3 came rolling into view. Kawani was staring at the hilt herself, more engrossed in the object than she thought she should be, as R3 bumped into her right leg for the second time, snapping her out of her thoughts. I know what it is, Ahsoka, but I assume there is more to the saber than I could imagine, Kawani confirmed her interest. Absolutely, Ahsoka said quickly and returned. It belonged to one of the greatest of the Jedi Order, Kawani, or so I believe. It's his anyway, or was his, I don't know. She held it tightly and convinced herself to investigate its presence more deeply. There was more than enough to do at the moment. Let's see what we have here, she said while turning back to the hangar entrance. R3, we need to run several scans on this ship. Our objective is to leave the planet with it. We need to ensure it will not be traced after entering it. We also need to ensure we are not detected approaching or entering it. Then, I need to know if I can employ a Grade 3 hyperlink to the comm suite suitable for downloading the transceiving signal mask. We don't need to project, we can do that from the Liberator. I want to know if the link can be established for leeching. Kawani finished the recitation, staring to the night sky and counting the odors on her fingers to ensure she wasn't forgetting anything. I don't want a repeat of Narshada. Boops, beeps, and a sarcastic, prolonged whistle escaped the little droid as it rolled into the bay. I'd prefer not to repeat that myself, said Ahsoka. By the way, Kawani, I already know. Otherwise, you would have mentioned it by now. That's why we're running a mask and nothing more. We'll get you set up here. I'll mask you for my ship, but it'll be a permanent tag. It can't be scrubbed. Until I scrub it anyway, she smiled. What's her name? Astoka stared at the mantis for quite some time, not saying anything. The ship was, in essence, a relic, but a classic, and a well armed classic, the weapons foils brimming with sharp toothed destructive power. The hull was covered in repainted, carbon scored, aftermarket Durasteel plates, sporting every shade of gray imaginable. She, internally, gave whoever had taken care of her much credit and, at once, appreciation for keeping his centuries old ship in top shape. Morai, she said finally, a slight smile creasing her lips. Morai it is. Kawani could have sworn she heard that name somewhere before, but couldn't place it now. Easy enough to pilot solo, forget about that forward cannon without a droid of your own, though, but we'll see. More surprises wait inside, I'm sure. From the left side of the bay, R3 was finishing up with his data link, and the cadence of 3 beeps in Kawani's wrist, which confirmed it was clear to enter. Link with the ship. With the ship itself, to be sure, R3, no surprises. The little droid reminded Ahsoka so clearly of R2, even to the point of being flush with personality, although at the expense of being completely thorough with his assignments. She laughed to herself at the thought and the memory as she watched it speed toward the belly of the ship. We will be headed to Yavin, Ahsoka. Kawani returned her attention to Ahsoka. Yavin 4 to be exact. We are already synced on our comms, but use the same frequency in subspace if you need anything. Her attention pulled away at the hissing of the aft boarding ramp. R3, I didn't say open it, she barked without bothering to use the comm. The little droid turned its photoreceptor toward her and beeped furiously before withdrawing its data link arm, twirling its head twice and racing up the ramp. I swear I'm going to send that droid to the spice mines of Kessel one of these days, Kawani said in frustration. While laughing at the interpretation of the droid's frustration, Ahsoka motioned for Kawani to take the lead as they followed R3 up the ramp. With some hesitation, Kawani carefully stepped into the aft cargo bay in wide-eyed wonder. Ahsoka spun on her heels right behind her with the same look of curiosity and astonishment, silently conveying their discoveries to one another with a pointed finger or a hand wave. The two were amazed at the amount of weaponry assembled in the average-sized bay. Ahsoka, there is enough here to fortify the garrison on the other end of town, Kawani said, matter of fact. Torpedoes, contact missiles, power cells for all manner of cannon and blaster. Far more than I think this ship is capable of hosting. Arms dealer? And if so, what is, or was, the intended destination? She finished, not expecting an answer. I have no idea, but we can certainly try to find out, Ahsoka answered. Kawani, identifying items along her lines of expertise, and Ahsoka her own, were both amazed to find a wide assortment of top-of-the-line black market parts and crated items direct from Sinar Fleet systems, piled up carefully and bound to the rear wall of the bay. Kawani rushed over the largest of the energy-bound crates, sporting the crested black wings of the Sinar logo. Ahsoka, do you know what this is? I sure do, Ahsoka responded immediately. Brand new IG-45 hyperdrive. There are also new parts for the 215s. Everything here is new. I don't see anything aftermarket at all, she finished, voicing her amazement at the cache they had discovered. Ahsoka let her curiosity at what else was on board take over as she left Kawani in the bay hold to her discoveries. Walking through the forebay door and into the short hall, she identified a tech bay to her left and a crew's quarters to her right, but it was the engine bay directly ahead of her that she was drawn to first. A red wafting light from the ion power cell held all the illumination she needed to identify those same engines, twin 215s, for which the replacement parts were contained within the most immaculate engine compartment she had ever been in. The thought came and went quickly as her memory briefly drifted to her years spent in the Jedi Temple hangar, maintaining the various craft housed within it, compared to her presence here only. With that memory chased away, it only made her appreciate her immediate surroundings even more. An exact match of the new hyperdrive was in place against the rear port wall of the bay, impeccably spotless and fueled to near max. Returning to the cargo hold, she found Kawani gone and surmised that her inspections have to be have well would have to have been done by the communications suite. Smiling to herself at that acknowledgement, she made her way up the portside stairs to the upper level of the craft. Kawani wasn't inspecting the communications suite. She was poring over the central holotable's datapad, an image flickering in and out at its center. Ahsoka, you've got to see this. I'm trying to hack the log to stay the image and find out anything more I can. I've seen this man before, Ahsoka said, not hearing what Kawani said. I can't remember where, but I've seen him. Kawani finished her last line of code and committed it to the encrypted cycle, hoping it would nullify the security protocol that its previous owner poorly enacted. Should be coming back in cycle now, she said, in time with the green encryption emitter. The image became clear and began moving, the audio crackling in but unintelligible. What is he saying? Ahsoka relayed, paying more attention to the voice than the words. I have no idea. Nothing I've ever heard before, Kawani admitted. And I won't be able to dive into that without access to my archives. Something I am not too comfortable doing presently until I am assured of zero security risk. R3 rolled into the central room of the four communications bay, beeping, whistling, and whirling. R3, remote launch the Liberator and send it to 223.45 quickly, Kawani barked out. Good thinking, we can link in high orbit. Ahsoka commended the quick thinking of her friend, understanding R3's warning of an Imperial lockdown on the spaceport. They both rushed forward, Kawani stopping and seating herself at the comm suite, Ahsoka dashing for the cockpit. Dropping herself into the pilot's seat, she ran through the cadence of flight prep switches and buttons, with force-aided speed and precision, engaging the repulsor and lifting it off the ground. A glance out of the canopy confirmed the threat detection alarm blaring in the cabin as a squadron of troopers rounded the corner of the hangar entrance, supported by an ATST. Kawani, I need you in here now, she yelled out, hoping it was loud enough, as blaster fire began peppering the transparisteel. Her fears abated as the Miri Allen dropped into the co-pilot seat and engaged the shields without any instruction from Ahsoka. Diverting the forward deflectors, she relayed her actions as she powered up and controlled the forecannon. You can't go anywhere without getting shot at, can you? Depressing the trigger, she unleashed two shots that exploded with more intended authority than expected, and time stopped momentarily. They were both in awe of the devastating effects their salvos had inflicted. The squadron was just gone, obliterated. The domestically engineered and built hangar entrance was now twice its size, revealing the ATST lying on its side with his appendages nowhere to be seen. They both looked at each other with forming grins and nodded in complete appreciation of the ship in their possession. Ahsoka finished her pre-flight checks and engaged the 215s with a satisfying whine as blaster fire from sources unseen deflected harmlessly off the shields. Not wasting any time, she throttled up and shot from the spaceport in the planet's surface. Ahsoka continually considered the improbabilities of recent events and could not separate her current thoughts from what she had been living her entire life. What was normal for some was never normal for her, and it would never be normal for her. The thoughts, as they often did, came and went quickly. R3, reroute the Liberator to 304.52, Kawani broke Ahsoka's reverie. What did I miss? She indeed was curious. Nothing at all, Ahsoka. I had programmed the ship as an atmospheric moisture extractor and need to keep up appearances for now. Your version of normal runs somewhat parallel with my own, at times anyway, Ahsoka said. It does at that, Kawani cut herself off, and looked at Ahsoka, who clearly felt it too. What was that? When asked the question, neither of them had the answer. She had felt an added pressure in the cabin of another presence. The chill accompanying the unknown ran up and down her spine. Ahsoka turned her head, fully expecting to see someone, something, but saw only the rear of the cabin. The lights of the various consoles behind them, their monitoring screens, and the rounded dome of R3 indicated nothing had changed. I certainly felt something, Ahsoka finally spoke. Kawani, take the yoke a minute. I want to check this out. She got up from her seat and slowly went to the comm room, Kawani exuding satisfaction that it wasn't her idea. R3's photoreceptor followed Ahsoka from the cabin in an unarticulated whinny of anticipation of his own, being the only sound added to the rhythmic hum of the finely tuned ion engines. It was a chill, the likes of which are only reserved for the dead, that Ahsoka felt pass through her in a manner she could only describe as deliberate, as if its source were feeling its way through her. Her spine reverting to its original temperature, she turned slowly to see an almost invisible shape moving away from her and stopping in the doorway back in the cockpit. You both possess enough of the living force to prevent entry on my part, so it is in this fashion I must make introduction and state my intention. A disembodied voice issued, slowly and with emphasis, imparting no identifying accent or inflection. All other sounds ceased. All that could be heard by either Ahsoka or Kawani was the voice seemingly emanating from between them. I am Tsar Ek, embodying my interests in this realm. The Iktochi was simply a means of forwarding our removal from Tatooine, catered to the Mirialan's interest on behalf of her Togrutan friends' well-being. Kawani and Ahsoka were bewildered, confident they had spent too much time in the Tatooine suns. If you're referring to the bounty on Ahsoka, yes, I saw to that, Kawani spoke first. What bounty? It was Ahsoka's turn to question. I did forget to mention that, but rest assured there is no one on Tatooine fulfilling the bounty someone issued for your capture. Quite a sizable sum, I might add. Probably not the first time, Ahsoka returned. It's the seventh, according to the data on the holochip. Yes, the bond between you, I feel, was responsible for her involvement, Togruta. Tsar Ek continued. I reside within the Force, but am not the Force, Mirialan. Your people would call me a Sikcha Ikmakak, and Togruta, your people will call me Sadara Shidine. Both translate to Shadow Spirit if I have the correct inflections. Kawani and Ahsoka both nodded in affirmative. The Sith and Jedi once held to a prophecy, and my interest in this realm is to observe its culmination, as we believe that time is at hand. Many questions are better answered when time is more readily available. My objectives are aligned with nothing beyond my interests and those of the rest of us. Waiting for some time to pass and assuring themselves the spirit was finished with his statement, Kawani spoke up. Tsar, was it? I can speak for Ahsoka on this, but I am unsure how to respond. Ahsoka gave Kawani a shoulder shrug to confirm the statement's validity. If the reality is, as you say, we clearly can't stop you from observing, but neither can you interact. This leaves both parties at a stalemate of sorts until mutual interest can be identified and made clear. That will have to wait, as the two of us must attend to a situation currently forming in front of us that needs our immediate attention. Ahsoka, waiting for some translation, only followed Kawani's outstretched hand and pointed a finger to the threat assessment board lighting up on the control panel. Dispelling all notions of a ghost in the cabin and shaking her head at her earlier thoughts of the new normal, she jumped in the pilot's seat once more and focused on the data provided by the assessment screen. 2 Imperial cruisers decanting from hyperspace and locking on our signal. Time to see what other surprises this ship has, Ahsoka said, alerting Kawani and preparing herself for combat. R3, we'll need you to reload spent weapons and assist when needed, Kawani conferred with her droid. Beep boop whistle. This damn ship can reload itself? How the hell do you know that? Boop whinny. Of course it did. Well, you tell the ship's computer to do its best and keep up, Kawani said while refocusing her attention on Ahsoka. Not that it matters at this particular time, but this ship's navicomputer puts even mine to shame. We have a dozen jump points in this sector alone, with routes displaying I've never seen before, relayed Kawani, giddy with excitement. That is good to know, Ahsoka said, bringing the weapon systems online and linking the data path to the assessment board. were almost off the charts, affirming the situation was well in hand. The ventral weapons arm deployed fully with a satisfying loud click. They sure don't make them like they used to, she finished, revealing her affinity for antiquity. 3 wings of ties, Ahsoka. Kawani keeping up with the latest events taking place in front of them. As she was prepping the deflector shield compensator for directional variations, the exact moment a volley of turbo laser fire from both Architons-class cruisers were finding their range. No idea how these shields will hold up against those turbo lasers, though. I intend not to find out, Ahsoka said before accelerating hard and employing countermeasure maneuvers to confuse the cruiser's tracking abilities. There is a more efficient way to handle this encounter, Zarek spoke up. One that would provide a legacy, so to speak. I'm listening, admitted Ahsoka. I've seen how capable you are with a saber in hand, and can grant us the ability to end this through that means. You leave us both in a conundrum, I am afraid, and can only respond like my friend did earlier. Ahsoka returned without taking her eyes off the controls or the data screens for fear of losing their advantage. Not the time to unravel mysteries, Kawani continued for her. The first of 3 wings of ties were upon them, the flight lead diving in with its twin laser cannons spitting lethal energy beams, harmless, however, as the ship's deflectors overmatched them, accentuated with the accompanying roar of its twin PS4 ion engines as it passed under the hull beneath them. Its 2 wingmates proceeded in the same manner, with the same results, to form behind them and create a containment perimeter as the remaining 2 wings closed in. Ahsoka pushed the yoke further, bringing them into full attack speed as the weapon systems chimed in, awaiting an authoritative trigger squeeze to unleash its payload. Unwilling to wait a moment longer, she simultaneously released an aft charge. She fired the fore and wing-mounted laser cannons with devastating precision, tearing through 2 advancing fighters and leaving the aft to dodge the concussive charge. The first squad lead was able to correct his trajectory and clear the sonic wave of destruction. His wingmates, however, could not adjust quickly enough and were torn to shreds instantly. Ahsoka began a feverish roll, bringing all forward laser cannons to bear on individual targets, and they responded in kind with explosive results, eliminating 2 more of the incoming ties. R3, take the lead on the rear cannons and target that final tie behind us, Ahsoka barked out. Immediately, with the data link arm inserted, R3 began the remote process of targeting the assigned order and brought the cannons to bear with rapid-fire bursts. Please at least allow me to demonstrate my claims, as this situation is but a canvas for opportunity. Zarek broke in once more. Your skills are admirable, and they seemingly mitigate possible danger from this encounter. For that reason alone, my skill set could prove sound, adding more emphasis to the latter. What exactly does that mean? Kawani was the first to question. I'll show you. And with that, the shadow was gone, and so was the chill in the cabin along with him. Ahsoka, this is one of the craziest situations I think I've ever been in, Kawani said, more an affirmation of her sense of self than a statement. Pretty normal day, actually. Ahsoka wasn't lying. In the time it took for that exchange, the chill had returned to the cabin, and they both whirled around, sensing his presence again, although the sight before them was anything but what they expected. A fully flight-suited TIE pilot brought his right hand to point beyond the canopy's transparent steel. Without thought, Kawani whipped out her blaster and fired several shots into the pilot's chest, burning through the fabric and flesh beneath, sending him sprawling in reverse in a mortal freefall. R3 twisted its dome around to examine the situation and returned the gaze to its master as if stunned by her reaction. Although concentrating as much as possible on the incoming parade of hostility, Ahsoka began questioning the validity of her last statement. Okay, nothing normal about that. What just happened? She said, voicing her thoughts. What I've been trying to tell the both of you, the voice of Sarek returned. Your encounter with the Iktochi had little to do with the Iktochi himself, and almost everything to do with my interest in you, the both of you. He added the last after a second of thought. You will find the tie on your aft, pilotless. R3 confirmed this statement with a trail of beeps and boops. assuring both Kawani and Ahsoka that the tie was decelerating and powering down. If you try your hardest not to kill me this time, I can accomplish quite a bit more, Zarek stated before vanishing again. Ahsoka looked at Kawani, who only shrugged her shoulders, her blaster still in her hand, and returned the gesture with a shrug of her own. Returning her focus to the battle in front of her, she watched as one of the ties broke formation, wheeled around, and started blasting away at the tie in front of it, decimating it quickly in a ball of burning light. The same tie came to bear on its next target with the same results, then continued on a forward path, up and well over the Marai, with no change in its trajectory. The odd angle and fevered maneuvering of one of the cruisers caught the attention of both Ahsoka and Kawani immediately, after concluding that the tie was no longer a threat. It was pitching hard starboard and what looked like a move to take it away from the other cruiser, thought Ahsoka, and without time remaining to ascertain any truth to the strategy, it erupted in a chorus of explosions, beginning aft and ripping centrally through the vessel's length, the results of which were bombarding the second cruiser with devastating precision. The remaining TIE fighters were already heading for the planet's surface, in apparent acknowledgement of the inevitable outcome unfolding. The threat assessment board began flashing its white indicator to inform Ahsoka that all was clear, and she could do no more than turn to look at Kawani. Okay, nothing normal about this at all. I will have to agree with you on that completely, Kawani said, shaking her head as the chill returned to the cabin. There is no threat, in short order, Zarek said. All attention was moved forward as they watched the second cruiser scatter its various parts in all directions with one final explosion. Well, that's going to get Imperial attention, Ahsoka said without taking her eyes off the shrinking ball of fire and gases. Something we're becoming quite good at, I might add, Kawani returned. No disagreements there. Tsar, we're going to have to discuss this in depth. I don't know exactly what you did, although I am beginning to understand how you did it. Either way, we can't afford the fallout of more demonstrations now, Ahsoka said, wanting to take the lead but feeling an uncertain urge to learn more from this being. Kawani, what do you want to do with your ship? She finished, trying in earnest to change the subject. It depends on our next objective, I suppose. We can leave it in orbit here and return to it another time. I can jump it somewhere else, we can link and piggyback. We've already discussed where I was headed, but that isn't paramount by any means. The larger question is, where do you need to go? Ahsoka thought about that for a minute and wasn't sure how to respond, not for lack of subject, but for immediate audience. She closed her eyes and reached out slightly with the Force, feeling Kawani and Zar immediately. She intends to identify Zar's intentions moderately. She saw Zar in what his corporeal form, humanoid, tall, broad shoulders, and pale purple skin was once. His eyes caught her attention, though pupils less white than they were. She placed a hand on the side of his head as it began to bow in submission to her, those white eyes closing in the process. She could see his mind with acute clarity. His past flooded her mind with their images, and how he emotionally responded to those images at the moment they were happening. How there was almost a complete lack of emotion on his part in the present. At them left her with significant doubt about him and their current situation. She enclosed him in a cloaking shroud of her imagery, meant only as a distraction. He was instantly flooded with continuously changing memories of her earliest recollections, Ahsoka being careful not to divulge anything important. She added random images of more recent memories meant to confuse any mental picture he was performing. As she poured more into her efforts, the return imagery was ceasing, ensuring that the process was working with significant effect. At that moment, she whispered only one word to the form of Kawani, Dagobah, and one meant for the Force itself, Master. Instantly, she returned her efforts to the Zeltran's form under her hand, and slowly released her touch. He dropped to his knees and visibly wept as Ahsoka reverted and brought herself out of the simple Force meditation. Ahsoka, Tano, You have experienced so much in so short a time. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like. Tsar cut himself off from the citation of his descriptions of the jumbled reality he was just subjected to. How can you convince yourself to trust anyone is a mystery to me. He finished as Ahsoka felt him get back up to his feet. And why he has such great interest in you, he added, Kawani twisting her head to hide her expression of pride at his musings of trust, assured in that comment that she had made the right decision. Whose, Ahsoka? Catching the final part of Zar's comment. Well, the one who commissioned the Iktochi, of course, Zar said. The hollow table, Ahsoka thought instantly. R3, can you reassess the recording the other saved data? The returning measure of sounds from the droid assured her he could. Ahsoka, about Imperial attentions. Perhaps we can discuss getting out of this system before we have to replay our last engagement, Kawani interjected, although I am sure Zara would relish the opportunity to displace starships throughout the system. The longer we're here, the more difficult it will be to leave. And honestly, I don't know I could, Zara said coldly. Ahsoka agreed immediately. R3 will figure out the holotable later. Take us to the Liberator. Kawani, understanding Ahsoka's intention, took her datapad from her pocket and began linking it to the ship's navicomputer. Just going to borrow some routes, she added levity. Ahsoka did appreciate the response, although her reaction to it was anything but. Her mind was racing with all that was becoming a desperate mixture of confusion. Lost in her thoughts for the sublight travel to Kawani's ship, she was trying feverishly to make sense of Zara's presence, or, more accurately, his presence at this precise time. The thoughts needed to be more organized if she attempted to make sense of everything, much less identify a path that Obi-Wan couldn't see, or maybe wouldn't see. Her destiny. She had never really given it much thought, usually being placed in reactive situations, albeit of her own making. Yes, she always did seem to draw attention to herself, but that usually came from reaching out to protect and guide others on their own destinies, but never her own. The opportunity to withdraw always seemed to conflict with the needs of others or the Force itself at times. She began to think heavily about her own needs and found that she hadn't ever put much thought into it, as her mind returned her query with a healthy dose of the unknown and indecision. Hey, you alright? Kawani punched her in the shoulder, pulling her back into the moment. Ahsoka blinked twice before realizing what Kawani had said. Yeah, I just lost myself for a minute there. She said the words, but didn't believe them. The meaning in the moment, the face in front of her own. Zara was correct. She found it difficult, if not impossible at times, to trust in anyone else or anything. But here was her Mary Allen friend, yet again, expressing concern for her with no motive for doing so. Good, 'cause we're here, Kawani smiled. Thank you, Kawani, Ahsoka said while wrapping her arms around her friend. You're welcome? Kawani returned the gesture, although uncertain of its origin. Ahsoka pulled back slightly, placed both hands gently on Kawani's head, and brought her head forward to rest, just as gently upon Kawani's. For being you, that was all she said. We got this, Ahsoka. I don't know what it is we got, but I know that we do, she said, bringing her hands up to Ahsoka's head to mirror the gesture again. I can't begin to describe how it feels to be trusted, she added softly as R3 tugged at her pant leg with his servo service appendage. Well, that was touching, added Zar. Yes, well, till we meet again, Ahsoka, Kawani said with a long look at her, brimming from ear to ear, R3 leading the way to the aft hold and docking hatch. You were right to withhold your intentions from her, Zar spoke as Ahsoka continued looking towards the aft of the ship, the direction of Kawani's departure. She would have tried to convince you otherwise, I believe. Ahsoka just shook her head. I don't even know what my intentions are, she said, taking her cloudy gaze from the aft of the ship to return to the pilot's seat. At least none that are reasonable. What is reasonable, Ahsoka, to one who's endured so much? That is the question, isn't it? She replied. assessing the ship's navicomputer to carry them to the Dagobah system. I can't stop you from coming with me, or even being present for that matter. But before I engage this jump, we will identify your intentions with absolute clarity, and we will do it my way, she finished, turning in her seat to face Czar with the most severe expression she was sure she had ever mustered.